All right, folks. So for this episode of Ladders to Leadership podcast, we have Brendan over here with Soligo, the head of customer experience. How you doing, Brendan?
Doing good. I'm glad to be here.
Ah, cool. And Brendan comes from the Florida area. And before we dive in, we always like to look forward to see like what's out in the horizon for you. So for Brendan, like what are you looking forward to this week? Whether it's personal, whether it's with your work with Soligo, like what's top of mind for you?
Well, I actually compete in billiards, so I have a couple of tournaments coming up at the end of the year. It's actually I'm competing tonight as well.
Nice. Oh, that's so cool. Right on. So with that, Brendan's with customer experience. Can you walk us through your journey in the solar space? Like, how did you get started into this?
Yeah. So I actually was doing door-to-door sales originally back in 2019, and back then it was actually pest control. And then the following summer, my buddies from pest control moved to solar, and they recruited me. And so that first summer, I did really well. I ended up being one of the top setters for the whole company. And, but I knew that I didn't want to be a setter for the rest of my life. I wanted to kind of progress into something more. And so I kept pitching the CEO of the company a bunch of ideas, and he liked them. So he ended up giving me an opportunity within operations. And so originally I was actually a IT manager. And so I just helped with the IT help desk and making sure that things were running smoothly. And then I did well in that role. And then they promoted me to be a branch manager. So I was overseeing two reps. And so we did a lot of like online leads and whatnot. And then eventually they promoted me to be the sales liaison of the company. So I oversaw sales and operations to make sure that they communicated well. And then they ended up merging with four other companies to be what was known as Lumio. But the whole thing was a mess. So I ended up leaving. And then I was the director of engineering at another firm called Flow Energy. And so pretty much I just oversaw the design process from start to finish. But ultimately, I wasn't really too happy there. So then I switched to Soligo in January of this year. And so I have been in charge of their customer experience from January until now. But I've really enjoyed the process, growing with them. And so also I am working to get my master's in business administration. So I graduate in December of 2026.
Wow, future congratulations for that. On top of doing what you're doing for work and competing for billiards in place, it's a lot on your plate, dude.
Yeah.
So out of all these things that you described, and like things that you may have not described, like what's been your proudest moment so far with being part of this industry?
I would say being able to innovate and help the company as much as possible, because I feel like a lot of times people keep doing the same things over and over and expecting different results. But so, for example, when I was a setter, I came up with a bunch of analogies that nobody else had thought of. And so the best one that I could think of is with people saying they don't want holes in their roof. I just really thought about like, what's the best way I can overcome that objection? And that kind of hit me. So I'd ask people, well, so quick question, is your roof held up with nails or with glue? It's like, oh, nails. So you already have hundreds of holes in your roof. It's no different with the solar, except ours is reinforced with four different ceilings. And so once I kind of came up with that analogy, people stopped complaining about it or were more understanding. So it's little things like that that I would then put into a presentation and, have other sales reps adopt the analogies and other sales practices that I created, and seeing my work actually improve the sales volume of the company.
I love that. And the reason why I love it, Brendan, is like people forget the concept of being a craftsman. Doesn't also, it's like, yes, you could work with your hands as a craftsman, but you also have to refine and work things with your head and think about the messaging, the positioning, the framing of these things. Like it's quite impressive to think about that because even with those small examples, it allows me to think about, okay, here's an individual that's looking to humanize the experience. And also, how do we disarm future objectives at scale? It's not just you. You're trying to think about bigger impact. How can I share this with our other team members? Because odds
Hmm.
are they're probably going to have to deal with the same issues with future prospects.
Yeah. Well, and the nice part about my current role is that I work directly with the executives of the company. And so
Hmm.
they take my word at face value as far as if I have an idea or something I want to change. And so a good example of that is I recently updated their entire sales contract or install agreement to where there's no room for confusion or knowing what they signed up for, and we just made it to where a lot of the issues that I saw repeatedly,
Hmm.
this new contract should correct it. As far as saying, oh, well, I thought it was just a pre-qualification or, I thought it was this or that. Like it just makes it very tight as far as this is what you're signing up for. You're hiring us. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah. And like once we find like a trait, odds are you're probably consistent in other avenues, which is what you're reinforcing over here. Let's talk about the business and the current landscape, Brendan.
Yeah.
So like, what's we talking about what you're proud of? Let's talk about like
Mhm.
the tactical aspect of your day to day. It's like what's been working really well for your business lately?
Well, the main thing is that we've actually expanded into several new markets. So, for example, we're in Wyoming, we're in Ohio. I think we actually just started another branch in California. But the main thing is that we try vetting new locations and seeing which ones will work and which ones will not. And so that way we can continue to grow as a company. But not only that, we have expanded into roofing recently as well as HVAC. And I'm trying to think of anything else. Yeah, just HVAC, roofing, and solar. And so that way we're more prepared for when the tax credit does go away to where we still have some kind of business coming in between the roofing and HVAC.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. It's how do we hedge it? And it's also a complementary industry. Like if you're on top of a roof for solar installation, one, like you have the roofing space and you have HVAC right there. So there's probably a lot of complementary skill sets that you could transfer with your team. Is that fair to say?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the biggest thing is just learning a lot of the terminology for roofing and for HVAC, because I'm very well versed in solar, but roofing and
Sure.
HVAC not as much. But I mean, I look at it as if I'm going to be in charge of the customer experience for the whole company, then I should probably understand all the terminology with every field.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about some of the wins and success stories you've had. Like what comes to mind for you as an example of a recent win with a customer that you're proud of?
That's a great question. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of like a really good win. I mean, I would say I don't really have like one specific person, but what I can say is that a lot of the times people have very simple, or not simple issues, but they just maybe have a misunderstanding, and then I help them better understand what they signed up for, and then they're happy again. I feel like a lot of times because I deal with so many customers every day, it's hard to just think of one specific person. But in a
Sure.
nutshell, I mean, I've helped hundreds of customers just kind of better understand where they're at in the process. So I think overall the win is making people happy again when they were frustrated. Um, but or a good example, here's one. So a lady was on budget billing. And so what that means is that if you don't turn budget billing off, you're pretty much going to be double billed because the utility company doesn't recognize the solar credit that it's producing. And so she was saying, "Hey, I'm still getting two bills. What's going on?" And so I looked at the bill and I just told her straight up, like, "Hey, so you're still on budget billing. So if you turn that off, you'll probably get reimbursed for those months you're still paying." And so once she did that, it was fine, and now it's working great.
Isn't it funny? It's like the small things can make the biggest impact for folks. It's just like
Mhm.
you, I mean, like not only were you addressing like, oh, like financially constrained because I'm getting two bills in place, but like, hey, like retroactively, we can help you support this part as well for you. And it just involves just simply just answering questions for folks that may have been frustrated or may have not had the proper guidance for them to know like
Yeah.
where to look for to help do what they need to do.
Yeah, and the big thing I've noticed is just making the customer feel heard. So that way they're more open to working with you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Like having the customer feel heard makes a big difference. It removes there's an errands of grievances to some extent, but also like we can get closer to the core problem sets for you. Absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah.
So Tell us about your challenges. Like, what's been the hardest part about running your side of the business right now?
I would say the main thing is just if a sales rep did not set a good expectation, I then have to go back in and fix it. So it's always kind of been an ongoing issue because we hire a lot of new sales reps. Because we're a very large company. We're one of the largest
Yeah.
installers in the entire state. And so, we do our best in our due diligence to train them and to get them up to speed. But every once in a while, you're going to have a rep that, says something or does something that, wasn't quite
It's
accurate.
going to happen with numbers for sure.
And so I think it's just more or less keeping up with the quality control of the sales reps to making sure that customers are treated fairly up front with the right expectation has been the biggest challenge.
Yeah. And then let's talk about from an operational perspective. When you're thinking of like with your role and having such a close pulse to the executive team, I would imagine
Mhm.
like you have a few bottlenecks in mind that like you're always constantly watching to sure like, hey, like what can we either audit today, later, or 90 days from now? Like what are some of the bottlenecks that comes to mind? And if you could have a magic wand to fix it, like what would they be?
I would say the main bottlenecks come at permitting, just because a lot of times if there's a building department that's very slow, we can't force them to approve a permit. Now,
Mm.
at the same time, in our industry, we have something called permit poaching, where another solar company tries to come in and steal the deal. And so
Oh,
it's a
really?
it's very shady, but there's a couple of bad actors that do it on almost every deal. And so with the bottlenecks of permitting getting worse in some cities, it makes it that much harder to sometimes retain a customer, if they were fed a bunch of lies from this new sales rep, saying, oh, you got ripped off or you got this. When in reality, we gave them a fair deal. They just are trying to take the deal from us and
Mm.
lie to do it.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
would say, yeah,
Oh, wow. I never really thought about like that from an industry perspective because it is public information once you pull those permits
yeah.
to do these things. Yeah, man. So where do you feel like most of your time is or resources are getting drained these days?
Um, I would mainly say, hmm, either people that are post PTO that just got turned on and they're concerned about their bill, or right at permitting where they're about to be poached. And I have to try to put out the fire and get them back on board. Because pretty much I'm in charge of trying to save the deals for the company, not just helping people be happy again. It's also saving them from canceling.
Yeah.
And it's a very tough job, because sometimes people are very dead set on canceling when they first call me. And then it's just trying to bring them back to a good spot. But the main issue though with after they get permission to operate is they think that it's just instantly gonna fully offset their bill. But let's say they got turned on in the middle of a billing cycle or something where it's like the middle of the summer, it's the hottest month. It's not always going to be immediate, but a lot of times that expectation isn't set properly.
Hmm.
So a lot of times the resources are just spent doing like an energy audit where I see how much they're consuming, how much are they going over versus what really what's the problem. So yeah.
Yeah, it's totally fair. I want to talk about like the future of Soligo. Like, let's talk about like that big picture that you have. So, like, where do you want your business to be in the next 12 to 18 months? You talked about new territories and expansion. Maybe dive in there and add some additional context and flavor.
Well, so I think the big thing is that once I do graduate, I'm expected to be the chief experience officer of the company. So I'll have a little bit more control over the customer experience than I already do. And so I really just want to fine tune the whole process to where, the sales reps almost set a really bad expectation so we can then exceed it, right? And make it to where they had a great experience because, let's say we tell the customer it's going to take 2 months to install, it only takes 1 month. It's little things that I want to tweak within the company that if we do it correctly, we'll have less cancels and we'll have more referrals. But not only that, also expanding to new markets. I know we've used to be in North Carolina and South Carolina, but the issue there is the HOAs, because unlike Florida, where you can install wherever, if the HOA denies it in South Carolina, then you can't do the project. So
Hmm.
it's just being smart about which states and territories to go into. And we're always are recruiting and adding to both the roofing the HVAC and the solar side. But I think more or less once the tax credit runs out, we're going to be more roofing focused and HVAC focused, with solar just kind of being a bonus. So,
Yeah. And it's also complementary. Like we've talked about this. I mean, like it's smart and strategic for it. It's just a matter of changing the language of the terminologies. But like you're still conducting, I would imagine, you're still doing installations, you're still doing inspections and some type of light consulting work that comes in.
yeah. Hmm.
So with that, like ambitious goals. Again, congrats on the post MBA initiatives that you have and expanding to other territories. We always see that technology is an amplifier. It's of what's
Hmm.
existing in place. So always looking at that process first. Otherwise, if you add in automation, it's only going to break it up if you have broken processes. So how do you see technology and automation playing a role in your growth over the next few years?
Well, I think the main thing is having a better communication line with the customers. So, for example, right now, whenever they move along the stage in our pipeline, they get an automated email saying, "Hey, you're at this stage, congratulations." But I want to make it to where, because I've seen software for AI call centers where it's fully AI, but it sounds like a human, and making it to where we could have some kind of AI agent actually make quick, like weekly update phone calls to customers saying, "Hey, just want to check in with you. This is the stage that you're at. If you have any questions, give us a call." Like, I think that'd be huge if we could have some kind of virtual agent in the future that could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the goal there is just to further enhance that experience and the touch
Mm.
points. Like the more
Yeah,
is your thesis, the more touch points equals the less likelihood to cancel and less
exactly.
churns.
Yeah, because a lot of times when people feel like we haven't talked with them enough,
Mm,
then that's when they kind of get a lot of doubts as far as, am I making the right decision? What's going on? So we pretty much just want to make it to where the customer always feels like they're in the loop at every part of the process. And that'll only increase that with that AI agent.
yeah, and it goes back to what you mentioned earlier on with this. It's just helping the customers feel heard throughout this.
Hmm.
It's you talked about it from the cancellation experience, but on that front onboarding experience, it's that same principle. Like let them feel heard and make sure like you're keeping up to date with them. The challenge is it is a tedious and laborious task. So finding ways to automate that, I would imagine, that's a driving factor for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Although at my old company, I actually built their whole Salesforce platform from scratch, and we had a lot of automations I had built as well. But my current company, we use Pipedrive. And Pipedrive's good, but it's
Mhm.
just a different process for building automations.
Yeah, and there's a learning curve for that, but like I'm sure you could translate some of those frameworks into Pipedrive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the other thing as well, getting back to the permit poaching, is that the whole reason we even have a cancellation fee is to where if it really does get poached, at least we'll get reimbursed for the work that we spent working on the
Yeah.
project. But it's standard in the industry, though. I mean, almost every company I know of, they have some kind of cancellation fees, so that way it kind of not prevents permit poaching, but it makes it to where it's tougher to switch.
I've also seen it in a different angle where they're calling it revenue recovery action. So like let's say
Yeah,
that you've quote unquote have been poached, but doing follow-ups with them after that poaching experience is to always check in to see like they might just have a bad experience with them. I mean, if someone's doing these kinds of activities, they may have slipped through the cracks just because of volume, or they just don't
yeah,
have a defined process unlike Soligo, and like you could pull them back in to some degree. I don't know how often that happens in the silver space, but I've seen it in the roofing side where like they've lost a deal. It goes into a revenue recovery process saying, okay, we almost had this revenue opportunity, but like how do we recover it? We nurture it and build it in case something bad has happened with the other competitor. Cool. So we are nearing the time on our end, Brendan. This has been great. We want to wrap things up on our side. We've got a few questions here. So you've been in this industry for quite some time. Let's take a step back and reflect for young Brendan that's slowly getting
Yeah.
into their career and trying to figure everything out. I mean, it's a scary time for folks that are either fresh out of college or they're early on in the career stages. What advice would you have for young Brendan?
I would say the main thing is back in 2020, it was a golden market. Either nobody had heard of solar or, the interest rates were really low. So loans were still like the primary way of selling solar. And I didn't realize how good I had it until interest rates started to rise. And then we had to switch from loans to leases. It was a huge change in the industry between 2020 to, I really say about 2022, 2023 is when it got pretty bad with interest rates. And it just made it to where, the loan companies had to increase their dealer fees. And it was a whole mess that we had to adjust to. So I think if I could tell my younger self something, is to really enjoy and do the most that you can now to take advantage of the opportunity that you have in those markets.
Yeah, completely fair with that. And I appreciate you recognizing that it's also a seasonal thing and you came in at an opportunity that was booming. But you just recognized that it was the norm for you. You didn't have context that this was actually higher opportunity than expected. So like it's always good to hear that, understanding like the seasonalities and recognizing, hey, if the iron's hot, strike it. Go, take advantage of this boom that you're experiencing today. Okay, and last question on our end, Brandon. Where can folks find out more about Soligo?
Yeah, so they can go online to soligo.io. So that's just our website where they can find out more. They can always reach out to us at info@soligo.io as well. Um, we're always open to welcoming new customers, and I always tell them that we'll make sure that their customer experience is good from start to finish. That's what we strive for. And what I really like about this company is that we're very transparent and honest, and we always try to make things right if something does go wrong. And we always try to go the extra mile with our customers.
All right. I mean, it says it here from what you're describing, like how do you do right with the customer? Always making sure that they feel heard. Brendan, thank you so much for your time and just sharing a little bit about how can solar make an impact for customers and doing it the proper way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd say the main thing for solar is just that it helps people hedge themselves against inflation. And so that way, even if the, electricity prices do rise, which they do, it just makes it to where you have a much cheaper option. So I kind of look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is another great episode of Ladders to. Thanks again, Brendan, for sharing your insights.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
And